Between 1975 and 1979, the Khmer Rouge killed between 1.5 and 2 million people in Cambodia. The exact number is still disputed. What is not disputed is the mechanism. The regime classified the Cambodian population into categories. People with Chinese ancestry were a target category. People with Vietnamese ancestry were a target category. Ethnic minorities were target categories. New people, urban dwellers, educated Cambodians, anyone associated with the previous government were target categories. The Khmer Rouge called what they were building Year Zero, pure, cleansed, Khmer. The man who designed that system was born Saloth Sar in 1925 in Prek Sbauv, a village in Kampong Tom province. He later took the name Pol Pot. His mother was a partial ethnic Chinese woman whose family had connections to the royal palace in Phnom Penh. His cousin was a royal concubine. His sister was a dancer in the royal court. The Chinese ancestry was documented in French colonial records, in family testimony collected after the regime's fall, and in the genealogical work of researchers who spent years tracing the lineages of Khmer Rouge leadership after 1979. There are people alive today in Cambodia, survivors of the killing fields, children of people who were murdered for having Chinese surnames or Vietnamese mothers, who do not know this. It has not been taught in schools. It has not been prominent in the memorials. The man who built a machine to kill people like his own mother was presented to history and largely accepted by history as the purest possible expression of Khmer identity. That is the hidden variable, and the records that contain it have been available since the 1980s. The Khmer Rouge racial ideology was not incidental to the genocide. It was its architecture. Pol Pot and the inner circle of the regime, known as Angkar, the organization, constructed a specific theory of Khmer racial identity that positioned ethnic Khmers as the original people of Southeast Asia, corrupted by centuries of Vietnamese encroachment, Chinese merchant dominance, French colonialism, and American bombing. The revolution was framed as a restoration. The killing was framed as purification. The language the regime used internally, documented in the S-21 prison records that survived the fall of the regime and are now held at the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, classified prisoners by ethnicity with a specificity that served as both a targeting mechanism and an ideological statement. Chinese Cambodians, a community that had lived in Cambodia for generations, that had intermarried extensively with ethnic Khmers, that was largely urban and commercial, were classified as economically suspect by definition. Their property was seized. Their businesses were abolished along with currency itself. Many were killed directly. Others died in the forced evacuation of cities and in the famine conditions of the agricultural collectives. The Chinese Cambodian population, estimated at 425,000 before 1975, had fallen to approximately 215,000 by 1979, more than half dead or fled in 4 years. The man who oversaw that process had a Chinese grandmother on his mother's side. That fact appears in multiple independent sources. It is not in dispute among researchers who have examined the primary record. The French colonial archives are the starting point. French authorities in Cambodia maintained extensive genealogical and census records of the population they administered, particularly for families with connections to the royal palace, which the Saloth family had through multiple channels. The colonial record for Pol Pot's maternal line shows a woman named Chea Sorn, whose ancestry included Chinese lineage from the Teochew community that had settled in the Mekong Delta region in the 18th century. Chea Sorn was Pol Pot's maternal grandmother. The lineage is traceable. The French archivists who maintained it were not making an ideological argument. They were recording what they found. After the Vietnamese invasion ended the Khmer Rouge regime, in January 1979, a series of researchers began reconstructing the biographies of the regime's leadership. David Chandler, a historian at Monash University in Australia who spent 23 years producing what remains the most comprehensive scholarly biography of Pol Pot, published in 1999, documented the Chinese ancestry through the colonial records and through interviews with surviving family members. Chandler noted that the ancestry was well known within the family and within the village community of Prek Sbauv. It was not a secret in the way that secrets are hidden. It was simply not discussed in the context of the regime that Pol Pot built, because discussing it would have required confronting what it meant. What it meant is not comfortable to state, but the evidence requires stating it. The Khmer Rouge killed Chinese Cambodians as a category. The leader of the Khmer Rouge had Chinese ancestry. These two facts coexist in the historical record. They have coexisted since the 1980s. The field of genocide studies, which has produced extensive literature on the Khmer Rouge, has engaged with the first fact thoroughly and the second fact minimally. The asymmetry is not accidental. Here is where the genealogical record produces its most specific finding, the one that reframes everything that came before it. In 2004, a team of Cambodian researchers working under the auspices of the Documentation Center of Cambodia, a Phnom Penh-based organization that has spent 30 years collecting and archiving records of the Khmer Rouge period, traced the Saloth family genealogy through multiple branches and confirmed what the French colonial records suggested. Pol Pot's maternal line showed Chinese ancestry in the second generation, not the third or fourth, meaning it was close enough to be socially visible in the community where he grew up. This was not distant ancestry absorbed into Khmer identity over centuries. It was the kind of ancestry that, under the Khmer Rouge classification system Pol Pot himself designed, would have placed a person in a suspect category. The Documentation Center's finding was published in Cambodian academic literature. It did not receive significant international coverage. It has not been incorporated into the major English-language accounts of the Khmer Rouge that are taught in universities and cited in genocide studies curricula. The absence is not mysterious. The Khmer Rouge legacy is politically sensitive in Cambodia in specific ways. The surviving leadership, some of whom faced trial before the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia beginning in 2006, had incentives to maintain the ideological coherence of the regime's self-presentation. The Cambodian government, which inherited a country that needed to rebuild its sense of national identity after the genocide, had its own reasons for not centering the story of the Khmer Rouge on the ethnic ambiguity of its founder. The international community of genocide scholars, which had worked to establish the legal and historical framework for the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, was focused on accountability rather than on the specific irony of the founder's ancestry. Each of those reasons is understandable. None of them is a reason to continue not saying what the record says. There are survivors of the S-21 prison, Tuol Sleng, where approximately 17,000 people were tortured and killed, who gave testimony about being classified by their interrogators as Chinese-influenced, Vietnamese-influenced, insufficiently Khmer. Bou Meng is one of two known survivors of S-21. He has given testimony about the classification process, about how ethnic identity was used as both a charge and a sentence. He is still alive. He lives in Phnom Penh. The question of what it means to him, and to the other survivors and their descendants, that the man who designed that classification system was himself of the ancestry the system targeted, that question has not been asked of them publicly. It should be. The genetic dimension of this story is distinct from the genealogical one, and it is less resolved. No DNA analysis of Pol Pot's remains has been published. Pol Pot died in April 1998 under house arrest with the Khmer Rouge remnants near the Thai border, in circumstances that were never fully investigated. His body was cremated within 24 hours, reportedly at the request of his family, before any official identification or forensic examination could take place. The cremation prevented DNA analysis that could have confirmed or detailed the ancestry suggested by the documentary record. Whether the cremation was purely customary or whether it also served to foreclose forensic investigation of the regime's final leader is a question the record cannot answer. What the record can answer, through the French colonial archives, through Chandler's biographical research, through the Documentation Center's 2004 genealogical work, is that the documentary evidence for Chinese ancestry in Pol Pot's maternal line is solid, multiply-sourced, and has been available to scholars for 4 decades. The decision not to center it in the major narratives of the Khmer Rouge was made, repeatedly, by researchers and institutions with various reasons for that decision. The decision has consequences for how the genocide is understood, taught, and memorialized. The Khmer Rouge classified people. It killed categories. The category of Chinese Cambodians lost more than half its pre-war population in 4 years. The man who built the classification system was, by the standards of his own system, classifiable. He was not classified. He classified others. The machine he built did not know what his family knew. There are children in Phnom Penh right now who are studying the Khmer Rouge in school. Cambodia has a mandatory curriculum on the genocide. It covers the ideology, the death toll, the mechanisms of killing. It does not prominently include what the French colonial archives show about the family of Saloth Sar. The curriculum was designed by people who had reasons for their choices in a country that is still working out how to live with what happened. That is understandable. It is also a choice that has consequences for whether the next generation of Cambodians understands the specific nature of what the Khmer Rouge was. Go back to Prek Sbauv, 1925, a village in Kompong Tom in the French Protectorate of Cambodia. A child born into a family that had connections to the royal palace, that had Chinese ancestry on the maternal side documented in colonial records, that was not poor, that was not marginal, a family that was, by the standards of the society around it, reasonably secure. That child became the person who emptied the cities, abolished money, and killed between 1.5 and 2 million people in the name of Khmer racial purity. The ancestry he carried from that village into everything he built is in the archives. It has been there for a long time. What it means about the man and about the genocide and about how we tell the story of both is a question the evidence raises and that the major accounts of the Khmer Rouge have not answered directly. The record is clear, the ancestry is documented, the ideology built on denying that kind of ancestry killed over 1 million people. Stating all three of those things together, plainly, in the same sentence, is something the historical literature has largely declined to do. The evidence does not decline. It simply sits in the archives, waiting for the question to be asked in a room where the answer is allowed to matter.